Today we're going to be talking about how insecure thinking can lead to conflict. And this week we actually had a bit of a test in our relationship that I think we passed, if that's a thing to pass.
It was an invisible test for me, so I guess I must have passed,
Yes.
as far as I know.
Oh, you mean you didn't know there was a test?
I didn't know there was a test. I didn't study for it. I didn't prep for it.
Well, the reason that I'm saying that is because insecure thinking can often lead to conflict, as it has in our relationship many
Yes.
times. And last week, I was actually quite nervous because I was getting ready for my training. I had my first weekend of a 6-month training that started on Friday. And in the days beforehand, I noticed that I was feeling quite anxious. And I was pretty good about not engaging with the anxiety. I didn't like the feeling of anxiety, but I just sort of allowed it to be there. I didn't try to do much about it, and eventually I feel much better now after the weekend. But during one of those times in the past, we probably would have had a blowout fight.
Yeah, but I actually think that upon reflection, you tend to get very hyper-focused with the task at hand, that you may well be nervous about it, but you're very good at channeling your energy and resources into the task at hand. So I, on the other hand, have a tendency to wallow in anxiety about whatever the task in hand is, and I know what you're referring to. You're referring to that occasion when we did one of our, I think it may have even been our first ever training.
Yeah, it was our first training, yeah.
And ironically enough, we had a really big fight not 20 minutes out from starting it on our drive to Malibu. And I think that in that situation, being one of our first trainings, I was extremely nervous about how I was going to show up. and a typical scenario for us is if we're in the car and I'm feeling nervous. Whenever we're in the car, you like to chat, and you were probably rabbiting on, and I was just wanting to be in my head exploring all the ways that this could go horribly wrong. And you're rabbiting on, interrupting my negative future fantasy, and I can't remember exactly how or why things kicked off in the way they did, but whatever the straw that broke the camel's back, it was just me looking for a fall guy. It was my ego looking for someone to blame for. Well, actually, it was very easy to blame you, because at that point I think I was like, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be doing any of this. At that point, when I was still trying that hat on for size in terms of being a teacher. So yeah, you were a very easy target, for all my woes and all my egoic worries about, performance and not showing up well. Mm-hmm. I was really nervous about that, and I definitely have that tendency to want to sort of. I think the ego in general needs to find someone to blame.
Well, I think that is really common. It's not just you, and I'm sure I do it as well. I just didn't happen to do it last week. But when we get caught up in our insecure thinking, one of the ways that we can try to distract ourselves from the feelings of insecurity, unworthiness, anxiety is to blame somebody else for how we feel. It's a way that we try to distract ourselves. And I think that that's why getting anxious, being caught up in insecure feelings can often lead to conflict, because it doesn't look like a coping mechanism, but it is one of the ego's coping mechanisms, is to, I don't feel good, I feel anxious, like, well, it must be because you're this way. If you were different, I wouldn't feel this way.
Yeah, it's like the ego is just looking for satisfaction. It just needs someone to blame and someone to destroy. It's like that. It reminds me of that game Asteroids. Do you remember that little spinning spaceship was trying to shoot everything inside? Pew, 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 pew. It's kind of like how I feel when my anxiety is up. And without, an awareness about what's going on, my ego just is like going nuts, looking at, has to have a reason. That's really not anything to do with me. I can't really take that on board for myself. I'm so out of touch with my feelings that my ego is wanting to, to pin on something else. Mm-hmm. That makes it so much more palatable in terms of, how my ego acts and operates.
Yeah. So I was like an incoming alien that you had to destroy.
You were.
So really what we're saying is that if you're, the first thing for you would be to notice that you're anxious, to have an awareness of what your experience is. And in that understanding and awareness, there can be the recognition that it's important in terms of how you relate to yourself during that time. That rather than having to destroy all those around you who might be trying to help, even, that you can look at how to take care of yourself when you're feeling anxious. And that's what I was noticing this past week, is that I could be okay even though my anxiety levels were much higher than they normally would be. Like, I wasn't sleeping as well as I normally would. I had that, kind of feeling at times in my stomach where I was feeling anxious, but it's like I didn't need to do anything about it, and I didn't need to make a story about it. And in the past, it would have meant that I wasn't good enough that I was feeling that way, and I knew that didn't mean that. And so just being able to be with your anxiety in a way where you're not making it mean anything, to be kind and gentle with yourself. I probably could get a little bit better at that one, but I think I was fairly good last week. And then, the likelihood of it ending up in conflict with someone you're close with is much less.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's developing an awareness around your feeling state, and then knowing, for argument's sake, if I'm feeling nervous, then that would be a time where I shouldn't trust my thinking and certainly not act out on it. And that, I think, has been pivotal, and I would like to think that I do a much better job now, that when the nerves surface, I'm much more cognizant of that, and less inclined to trust my thinking and act out from that place.
Well, you passed your invisible test.
I did pass my invisible test, but I didn't have any reason to feel nervous this weekend.
Well, I guess I passed my test.
You did.
Well, have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah, take care.